So since I'm talking about color grading and post-processing, it's only right for me to talk about color grading choices for this image. Now, for now, what I want you to know is that, come on. For now, all I want you to know is that I still might do some small tweaks on this image, because I've realized that I was moving the texture too much, so I kind of messed up this area. And then, of course, there will be some areas I still need to figure out my depth indicators, and I still want to slightly push those elements in here. But the way I'm gonna do it is, because I want to keep moving forward. The way I'm gonna do it is, after this video, I'm just gonna start looking for additional shots and refining additional shots, and then I might circle back to this image and maybe slightly adjust the lighting and slightly refine some of the objects in the scene. But for now, I just want to cover the color grading choices I've made for this image. So if I disable the color grading, what you're seeing right now, or the way I was building this image, is I knew I was building this image out of bronze, of metal material that's slightly bronze. I mean, it's just bronze, right? So, which means the whole image kind of feels warm in tone, and if an image feels warm in tone, it means I want to introduce some colors. And I want to do it just because I don't want for my image to feel monochromatic. And there is this other side that always will tell me that if I mean, just in general, if there are too many worms, then of course I want to introduce some calls. But I wanted to do it in this case without I don't know, for example, pushing, like, I don't know, a bunch of metals that feel blue. So that's why the main thing that pushes the cold tones in this image is the color balance node. And what I've done is I've just slightly moved the upper tones up towards the colors. Now I thought about talking about different color schemes and different, I don't know, color palettes, but all I want you to know is that the way I look at the wheel, those are colds and those are worms, right? So I either, with color balance, I will either, if this image, for example, were too cold in tones, then I might want to push this slider slightly down. But I want to push it because the image is way too warm. I just want to push it slightly up, and then I want to fine-tune the dark values too towards the colds. All right, so I don't want to fine-tune the color balance for now. You will have this node already set up in this Blender file. And by fine-tuning, what I mean is, sometimes, again, those are like a bit sloppy to control. Like, if you move your mouse just, you know, like slightly too much to one of the other directions, like, you will end up with just an entirely different palette, right? So you really want to be like fine-tuning those maybe differently, not maybe with those sliders, but what you can also do is go over here and change the hues, saturation, and value in here. So in here you have a bit more control. Oh, and of course, I had a bunch of different nodes plugged in here, my RGB curves and my brightness contrast node as well. And I know you can increase your contrast with RGB with the curves, but I just find them a bit hard to control. I might be differently, not hard, but it's just easier to drop another node and increase the nodes in here just by values. That's what I wanted to say. Now, what color balance, or accompanied of course, like with slightly pushed brightness curves, and then there are some nodes like bloom and of course lighten, because I wanted to get rid of the darkest darks. But I want to talk about what color balance done in here, because the difference isn't the shots, the post-process version, they are not that different, but I know this one works better, and I know this one works better because, and I still might want to push it later on, is because now there are more, the warmer tones are slightly desaturated, and some of the other tones in an image became colder, but they didn't become like super blue. Like if we look at this area, for example, right, you can already tell that it feels colder. But the thing is, it's not really super blue. It's just those are actually just the saturated warms. If I'm like start color picking my colors, so what happens in here, and it has to do just with the color theory, and it's something you learn when you do painting studies. If you have a bunch of warm tones and you accompany it with a bunch of desaturated tones, those desaturated ones in here will optically appear colder, maybe differently. So what I always want to avoid when working when creating images is to create one saturated tone and then pick the opposite tone, but also pick a saturated one, because this is just unpleasant to look at. I would say, because if your image is made out of a lot of warm tones, and then your image is made out of just cold tones, saturated cold tones, then it will be just an unpleasing looking experience. Now, I know you can use this, and I mean, even if you do stylized stuff, I would say most often they're not. You want for one of your tones to be more dominant in saturation than the other ones. Or not, because I don't want to confuse you. In general, when I'm doing images, I'm paying attention towards the saturation of the whole thing, meaning the saturation of my warm tones and saturation of my cold tones. And usually I will want for my one of the tones to be more saturated than the others. But also, I don't want to make a statement here when I would say like there is no point in having saturated colder tones and saturated colder tones. It was just the rule that I was following with for this image. Now there's other rule that I wanted to follow while color grading or creating this image in general, and the rule was I want to avoid having whitest whites in my image, and I want to avoid having darkest darks in my image, because those, they don't exist in nature, and those can get a bit distracting. But sometimes there are some cases where I will want to push my tones like really dark, but I wouldn't. What I always want to avoid is pushing them towards like the darkest darks. So for example, if I want to have like a super darker tone in my image, I would say it will be like of value like 9.5 or 9, and I will want for the value, but I still will want for the blacks to go into some color, and I will be able to push blacks into some color just by adding light and note. Now, when it comes to whitest whites, so I want to avoid whitest whites because the painter inside of me is making this conscious choice. But the thing is, with whitest whites, and it has to do with darkest darks too. On the other side, if I want to push, because I want to start doing, I've already prepared like a bunch of additional shots that I will want to show you in a second. But what I wanted to say is, there is painter inside of me, and I was guided by the painter when doing this shot. Meaning I was being very careful with the whitest tones and the darkest tones. But also now for the additional shots, I want for the cinematographer inside of me to take the wheel. The thing is, painterly rules, I mean, cinema or cinematography rules are quite similar to the painterly one. I mean, of course, they are, but what I wanted to say is, when doing more cinematic shots, sometimes you want to create even more contrast, meaning sometimes you want for the certain parts of our image to reach like whitest whites and even like darkest darks. But again, I want for those darkest darks to even tone into some color. But what I wanted to say is I'm super when doing this exact image, I didn't want to have like overexposed areas, meaning I didn't want to have whitest whites. But now that I'll be showing you some or working, refining some other shots, because I will want to make them feel more cinematic, I think I will want to put more overexposed areas in an image. I will want to do it. It's just because how well camera works. So I'm just gonna show you those. Those will be the next shots we'll be doing, and I'm going back and forth refining different parts of this tutorial. I want you to know that initially I wanted to wrap this tutorial on those two shots, but then I decided because I was missing the cinematic feeling from this shot, so then I decided to prepare additional frames for this tutorial, and of course I prepared additional vids that you will see at the later portion of this tutorial when I talk about those images too. But what I want you to know for now is that when I was working on this image, I was thinking like a painter, and I was following a certain amount of set rules. But when I started working on this image, you will see the process, I was thinking more like about this image like a cinematographer, or I don't know, maybe differently. I was applying a bunch of painterly rules or painterly what I consider to be painterly post-processing to the first image, and then knowing those rules, I decided to break some of them in order to do post-processing with in case of this image. So I wanted to make this image feel a bit more cinematic. But also I want you to know that I still consider this image to be an enviro art. Now the first image I consider to be a bit more painterly, and this one as well I consider to be an environment art. And the reason why I consider this to be an environment art and consider this to be an environment art is because I wanted to show every piece of the environment and wanted to make the every single choice that I've made in here, I wanted to make it visible. And all I want you to know for now is that I'll be moving more towards cinematic shots, and I might show some like shot decks, images from shot deck, and talk about the difference between cinematic and painterly. But what I want you to know is that at some point during the process, there will be additional shot, and we right after this one that I will start refining, and this one I will want to feel like super cinematic, or just like regular cinematic. And I consider this to be also a shot that focuses on mood. Meaning this shot isn't anymore like fully environmental shot, because I've introduced stronger volumetrics in here, and I was looking for a way to distribute the colors better, to unify the mood better with the use of volumetrics and whatnot. But because I've used volumetrics, what happened in here, certain parts of the environment, they're becoming a bit harder to notice, right? So that's what I'm saying. This is like a more cinematic shot where I was emphasizing mood. Whereas in this shot, I was really wanted to, well, showcase the architecture, showcase the environment. If I were to make this shot a bit more cinematic, then of course maybe I will want to push light in certain direction, as in I would want to focus more on pushing the mood. But if I were to focus more on pushing the mood, then certain parts of this image might stop being noticeable, right? So all I want you to know is, to me, this is environmental art, because I see the whole environment, I can recognize it. The purpose of this can be for example, for games, right? This I consider a slightly more cinematic shot, just because I was messing around with overexposed area. It's something that camera will sometimes do, and has to do with how where you point your camera, and where you're pointing your sensor, and with how much light comes into your lenses. And then of course, as I mentioned, I consider this to be a more cinematic experience, and this is the approach when I'm working for the movies. What I will do is I won't be too focused on refining the environment. I will just want to focus more on creating the mood, which means I won't be refining in some cases I won't be refining a lot of the assets, and also it ties back to why I also don't want to overspend my time over polishing the assets, because sometimes the project's direction will change, and sometimes if I know I'm working on cinematic shots, then I know that I don't want to spend more time than I need on creating the environments, because in cinematic shots also what I want to sometimes do more is focus on the characters within the scene. I mean, hopefully I'm making sense, but you can already see like the difference in tones and grading and in values and in general in color palette, right? I mean, you can clearly see in this shot that everything is extremely visible, and even the corners of the image, right? I try to still follow this. I wanted to mix those two rules. As in, I wanted to keep this image a bit painterly, and I wanted to make it also feel a bit cinematic. But also I feel like there's too much happening in terms of what the light is doing, and what the light is doing is making everything visible in this image, right? So in a lot of cases, those images will be way more pleasing for me to look at or work with. But again, because I wanted to push the mood, I had to use volumetrics, and because I've used volumetrics, it means certain parts of the environment become less and less visible. So, oh, and then there's a last shot that you will be seeing in here. Now, this one I'm still thinking how I want to categorize this one. Because what I mean, when I will be picking a frame for this one, or picking up composition for this one, the main thing I will want to focus on is, because I will be refining the scenes so much, then I will be just able to grab an extra or two additional shots, because I'm using 3D. I've established the scene and it's just free in 3D, right? And the only thing I was concerned with picking up a composition with like, I think those will be like over 100mm lenses, and I wanted for this cylinder to fill the majority of the screen, and I wanted to have this strip of characters, and I wanted to keep my horizon line extremely low. So what you're seeing right now are those, we've just wrapped working on this image, and from now on I'll be moving to this image, building and refining the scene, changing the lighting, and then I will move to additional frame where I'll be refining the environment a bit more, and then I'm gonna pull off the camera and just look for a shot to refine, because hey, this is free and this provides also more value to me, to the client, and hopefully to you. What else? I'm just gonna go through shot deck and talk about some of the images we are seeing in here. So this is a great example of using overexposure in your camera, depending what you focus on your camera, and depending on your camera settings and exposure and how much light goes through your lenses, you might come up with a shot where certain parts of this image will be overexposed. Now, if you were to move the sensor, focus the sensor, for example, in this case, I think outside of the window, what would happen is the sky might become a bit visible, meaning that the sky might be a bit lower in value, and then I guess what would have happened is whatever is inside the car would appear darker. But I'm kind of guessing right now. I'm showing you this shot because sometimes I will want to achieve this overexposed effect in my shots, but I want to be very careful with it, because even to me, like, the difference between this is like a super bright value, and difference between this is that's a huge difference to me. Like, this one clearly looks super white, and there's also like some bloom which brightens different parts of the image, whereas in here those whites are slightly toned down. And maybe also because, I mean, the value difference isn't that big in here. I mean, it's noticeable, of course, but maybe also what helps in this image is that we are not as distracted by this value range, by the super bright values, right? Now, when it comes to color grading the movies, is because movies just have different amount of rules, because movies are moving picture, right? So frame for frame will change, and of course you won't be able to place your character or your points of interest in first. And in so many ways, like movies are like this shot. What the hell? Shot deck. Or not, let's look at some horror images. But I need for shot deck to load. God damn it. Shot deck is working very slow. So I've grabbed a screen grab from shot deck from movie Don't Breathe. And if someone were to paint this image or create this image with like this painterly attitude, what someone might do is do this. And then someone would do this. So what I've done in here, I was obviously trying to follow my painterly rules, meaning not every shot in a movie will be in first, right? That's for sure. And sometimes or most often than not, we'll be just focusing our camera around the characters and what the characters are doing. I think even the whole, I don't want to lie, but I think even like one of the new Mad Max movies was shot in a way where, because the framings were changing so often from shot to shot, that they tried to keep the action in the center of the frame. But what I wanted to say is, if you ask me as a painter to do a painterly shot of a character doing something, struggling, different character, this is what I would come with. This is what I would create. Meaning, I would create a bunch of characters, maybe to the middle, if this is meant to be like painterly shot, meant for like cinema purposes. God, I'm not making sense. Fuck me. Let me try again. The painter inside of me wants to create contrast near our focal points, right? So of course I will want to create contrast by silhouetting something. And then there was the source light, and the source light, the painter inside of me, that I don't want to have biggest contrast points near the end of my frame, because bigger contrast, this creates attention, right? Whereas shot that is just like this, one would assume that our eyes will go immediately over here, because here's the biggest contrast. But here's the thing, when we are watching the movies, I mean, or in general, our heads or our eyes are just programmed to recognize human figures, to recognize letters, and to recognize number, meaning whenever there is a character in a frame, we'll always spot them, even though this should create like move our this contrast in here should dominate our attention, right? But it's not happening. I mean, we are still fully are able to enjoy the shot. And then there is the mood unified by dominating colder tones. And notice how those colder tones, even if they're super dark, they're still going into some color. And in case of this image, of course, you can see like even some of the darkest darks. But please remember, this is a shot from the horror movie, and even in horror movies, you still want to push your values a bit, because you need to see something in an image, right? And then of course, I'm not saying that in order for your image to look cinematic, you want to push the image to the whitest whites and the darkest darks. What I'm trying to get at, or what I was trying to convey in here, is that depending on what I need to do or what type of images I'm working on, I'll want to have like one of couple of approaches, right? So I either can approach the image as a painter, but also I can approach my images in a way where I will make this creative choice to make them more cinematic. It's just that I'm trying to be aware of I don't know, the rules, and then I want to be able to break the rules. But also differently, I always struggled when I was working in an image, because what I was trying to do, I mean, this image might be an example to some extent. I've tried to make this image feel cinematic, and then I wanted to try to show a lot of the environment in here. And what I ended up with is an image where the values feel attached all over the place, right? Even if the values, for example, in the resting areas of the image are somewhat grouped together, I'm getting a bit too distracted by the intense light and maybe by the intense light in here. So what I'm trying to say in here again is that it's important to know the rules, and it's important to try and understand which rules we can bend on or break. But what really again helps is to try to decide what you make, what's your goal when you're working on an image. If you want to make it feel a bit more painterly, if you wanted to make it a bit more cinematic, because the thing is, if you try to make it both, if you also try to make the shot extremely cinematic and then you try to showcase your whole architecture, then you might struggle with wrapping up the image. But not to say that you can do all of those in at once. What I'm trying to say again in here is I'm just trying to stay aware of the rules, and I'm then making creative choices to break some of the rules, or I'm making creative choices to steer towards like more cinematic feeling or more painterly. All right, so let's move on to I might talk a bit more about color grading while I'll be refining some of the shots, but I will see. For now, we're gonna move towards this shot. And when it comes to blend files, you will have blend files for this shot for sure, for this one, and I think for this one as well. I'm not sure I will want to include this one just because I think I started working for this file as a separate scene, separate file, and I needed to I need to clean every of the Blender files, and I think like sharing I don't know 2 or 3 files will be already plenty enough. And while I'll be working on those images, I'll be, for example, changing volumetric settings in this image and in this image, and of course in this image as well. But I won't be going into like technical details of like tweaking volumetrics, and I think I'm just gonna be like skipping ahead. But if you will want to check volumetric settings from each of the scenes, then just like you're totally free to check how I've placed those volumetrics in the Blender file. Because for example in here, I don't know if I mentioned, but in case of this image, I wanted to push back my volumetrics behind my structure, because I wanted to create like this clear graphic read, right? But then again, now I'm thinking that maybe I will maybe the jump in contrast is a bit too big in here, whereas when it comes to this image, I've placed the volumetric cube closer to the camera. I mean, just because the environment shifted, right? And I had this real estate over here, which means I had this bar, and I wanted to push the mood and Reese as well. So that's why I've dropped a volumetric cube in here, but I didn't, of course, drop a volumetric cube in here in front of the camera, because again, I wanted to clearly see the environment. All right, let's move towards to refining this shot.